So today I am going to be sharing how God told me my husband was the one. And I can promise you that if you follow these promptings from God and implement the things I did and look for the signs that I'm going to share with you, you will definitely be able to weed out the wrong guys who are not for you and know who the right one is for you. There were four specific things that God did to confirm and show me that my husband was the one he had for me. And there were many ways he continues to show me throughout our marriage. And you're going to get all of those juicy details right now. So let's get to it. My husband and I met in 2016 and got engaged 4 months after we met and married 9 months after being engaged. And we will be celebrating being married 7 years in January 2025. And we currently have two toddlers that are 13 months apart. So I actually knew of my husband 2 years prior to actually talking to and meeting him because I met him through my baby sister. And I didn't think of this at the time, but this should have been a sign to me that something was going on here because in my sister's 26 years of her life, she has never ever tried to hook me up with anyone. So it was definitely a surprise to me when she said that there was someone that she had that she thought I should meet. And at the time, my now husband was a supervisor at my sister's job. And just from the little time that she had been around him, she thought that we had a lot in common, particularly his accent and his cooking skills. My husband is Jamaican and he's from New York, and she knew that I loved accents and food. So, for whatever reason, she thought if nothing more, we could at least be friends since she felt like we had those things in common. So, she shared this information with me about him and she told my husband about me. But at the time, I was actually in a situationship and I wasn't really interested, but he did send me a Facebook friend request and literally that was it. So, fast forward 2 years later on Christmas Day, he reached out to my sister to say Merry Christmas, and unbeknownst to me, she actually asked him, was he single and was he still interested in meeting me? And he said yes, of course. And coincidentally, I actually had just ended things with this situationship that had been going on for almost 2 years earlier that morning on Christmas. But to be clear, I was not interested in jumping into something new so quick. So in my mind, I thought that if I gave him my number, we would just be friends. And in the event I needed a plus one or something, he would be my go to. So we end up talking for the first time later on that day, which was Christmas Day. And honestly, as they say, the rest is history. But I do want to get into how I knew he was the one. And confirmation number one was God prepared me beforehand. So before I even met my husband, God had already began to prepare me for my husband and for marriage by teaching me patience, forgiveness, understanding, selflessness, how to be a keeper of the home, and having me get rid of a lot of hanger-ons that I had. And I went through a lot of changes that I really didn't understand at the time, but they all were helping me to become a better me. And I have always been someone who loved to cook and clean, but I noticed that I started to not liking to eat out so much and I was wanting to try new recipes. I also started reading numerous of books on relationship and marriage, and there were two that I really liked that really helped me, and they were one called The One Revealed by Caroline Roberts and Before Saying Yes to the Ring, also by Caroline Roberts. I'll leave both of those books linked in the description box because I do believe they really are good reads if you are looking to get into a relationship or wanting to prepare for marriage. But I also learned to appreciate my own company and find joy and peace being by myself. And need I say, this all wasn't a plan that I had made. Everyone literally started to disappear in my life for that season. And it was to the point where I literally had no choice but to really get to know myself and love myself. And like I stated before, when my sister told me about my husband 2 years prior, I coincidentally at that time in my life was also in constant prayer for who my husband was. And I was also dealing, like I said, with a situationship at the time who turned out to be a counterfeit. And in hindsight, I should have expected it because the counterfeit, if you know, usually comes before a blessing. And the situation that I was in with this guy definitely didn't feel like a blessing. But, sometimes we're hard headed. And when we want what we want, we just do whatever we feel we have to do to keep it. And there were many red flags with this counterfeit that I was with. And I should have immediately left that situation, but I thought I was so close to having a fulfilling relationship and marriage by just staying with this person and constantly praying for him and for God to change him. But little did I know, God was teaching me not to idolize a relationship or even marriage. And even though I would have never thought that that's what I was doing, when I look back and I look at my actions, I really was doing that. So I was grateful for that season that God taught me that with that situation. And thankfully, I ended the situationship before it was too late because honestly, things were not getting better with him. They were actually getting worse. So, like I stated before, I ended things with a counterfeit the morning of Christmas Day. And later on Christmas Day, I met my now husband. And that led to the second way that God confirmed to me that he was my husband. And that was by how he treated me. During my alone time, one of the things I learned was that a man who is led by God will love you in a godly way and show it through his actions. And my husband did this from day one. Our first few conversations we had were about life, marriage, kids, and literally just getting to know one another. Sex did not even come up in our conversation for the first couple of weeks we talked. And he also wasn't trying to Netflix and chill. And this was huge to me. I laughed, but it was huge to me because that was very typical of the guys that I had been meeting in my past prior to him. But my husband actually asked me to go out on a real date. And after a few weeks of dating, he asked if I was ready to take it to the next level and get into a committed relationship. And I said yes, of course, because we're here now. But 2 months later was the first test of our relationship. And that was because he lost his job that he currently had. And this was actually beneficial to our relationship because it allowed me to see how he responds to trials and tribulations happening in your life and literally how he handles obstacles. But he actually handled it very well. It took him about 2 to 3 months before he actually found another job. But you would have never known that because he continued to take me out on dates. He continued to pay for things. And I'll be honest, I was nosy. So I was like, how are you paying for all this stuff and doing all of this and continue to pay all your bills and you don't have a job? And he informed me that he always kept a cushion of at least 3 to 4 months of bills saved up. So he had a savings that he could rely on. And he said if that were to run out, he had things like 401k. So I was like, yes. So all these were signs that I was paying attention to, that was checking off things on the list that I had previously had of what I really wanted in a potential mate and husband. And it was also answering prayers and giving me confirmation because like I said, I previously had been praying for marriage, my future marriage. And these were all things that I was asking that a man would reveal to me, in our courtship. And another thing that also happened during this time was we joined a church together. When we both met, we were actually both looking for a church home. And we took one of my friends up on her offer to come visit her church that I attended a few times. And after my husband and I attended a few of the services together, I thought that to myself that this was a church that I could actually see myself joining. And before I could even mention it to him, he was asking me how I felt about joining the church together. And that literally blew me away because I had previously had a hard enough time finding a guy to date that went to church, let alone one that was a member of a church or looking to join a church. So this was just icing on the cake for me when this happened. And as our relationship went on, I continued to watch him do everything he said he would do, including pushing me closer to God and not away from him. The third way God confirmed my husband was the one was through our family and friends' approval. My husband met my mom on my first date because at the time we lived about 45 minutes away from each other. So I met him at my mom's house because they only lived 10 minutes away from each other. Plus, I was still getting to know him, so I needed a little reinforcement in case he did turn out to be crazy. Plus, I always recommend that you never go out on dates without someone close to you knowing your exact whereabouts and who you are indeed going out with. And a few months later, after he met my mom, he also met my dad. And when we went to visit my dad, because my dad lived about 3 hours away, during one of our conversations with my dad, he actually started talking to my dad about marriage. And my dad asked me to leave the room at that time. So I was a little confused, but then I thought about it like, wait, what's going on here? Now, my husband and I had already talked about our future. Like I said before, I had talked about kids and that we both wanted marriage. And I was enjoying us, if I be honest, enjoying just really dating someone, like really, really dating someone. Because like I said, I wasn't finding a lot of guys prior to him that were really trying to date to get to know you, that were dating for marriage and looking for something serious. They would say they were, and they had ulterior motives, but he was, honestly, if I could say, the first in a very long time that actually was trying to do that. And so I was caught up in literally enjoying us getting to know each other and everything that we were doing. So I hadn't thought in my mind like I used to in previous relationships, like, when is he going to pose? Or let me look for hints or clues so I can prepare myself. None of this crossed my mind. So when my dad asked me to step out of the room, I'm thinking my dad's going to give him one of those old school pep talks like he used to do when I was younger and in school and going out on dates. But when I left out of the house and went outside, and I thought to myself, oh my goodness, is he about to talk to my dad about marriage, between the both of us? And so I went for a little walk and I came back, and my dad was shaking his head, looking at me, and I'm like, oh my goodness. So, of course, once I realized that was going on, it kind of put me on standby, this really is going somewhere. And at that point, I was just so grateful that everything was going well with him and my mom, him and my dad. And so I just continued to pray, and I was like, Lord, just continue to lead me and guide me with wherever you see this going. And so we started planning a trip to go meet my husband's family who lived in New York, because like I said, my husband was from New York. And so we booked a trip to go fly to see his family because his sister was actually preparing to have a baby and she was going to be having a baby shower. So we thought that was the perfect time to go. That way I would get to meet literally everybody in his family at his sister's baby shower. And so literally the weekend before we were scheduled to go, we got engaged. And I was not expecting it because, like I said, we had planned to go see his family. So I was I definitely figured that I would not be getting engaged until I met his family. But he had everything set up. He wanted to take me as his fiance to meet his family. And although I hadn't met everyone in person, I had spoke to his mom and his dad and some of his sisters on the phone previously. But once I got to the baby shower, that's when I actually met everybody, literally everybody in person. And this was so important to us to meet each other's family and get each other's family approval, because if there was any issues with his family or my family, we knew that nothing was going to work, because I feel like that definitely is very important for families to get along, of two people coming together, especially with the parents. And so this was definitely confirmation for me that both of our families got along with both of us. And the fourth way God confirmed my husband to me was through fasting and praying. In the beginning, I was a little unsure for a little while with my husband, and I had feelings of being unsure and anxious about a potential relationship, but I wasn't unsure or anxious about him, if you understand that. But I continued to pray and even went on a fast and started to receive peace, literally, once I completed the fast. And then I noticed that I started to have strong feelings for him that I didn't have before, that weren't as strong. And then those feelings start to grow into love. And I started to really care about him. I was really relaxed around him. I was really opening up and being myself around him. And this is something I had a hard time doing with relationships in my past. I feel like sometimes in relationships, when we really want a relationship with someone, we'll take on a persona that we think will appease that other person. And of course, that never works. And if you ask me, you should always feel comfortable and like you can be your true, authentic self to those close to you, but definitely with the person you're planning to spend the rest of your life with. I have a few reminders and tips that I want to give you because once my husband and I got married, there were things that took place from time to time that would continue to confirm to me that my husband was the one for me and sent by God. And I want to share those 5 things as tips and reminders because there are things you might not think about before you get married, but they will definitely help you on your journey of confirming who the right one is that God has for you. And those things are: number 1, don't be unequally yoked. I don't care how much you have in common and love each other. If you don't have the same morals and values, at some point you will clash, and you don't want to wait until you've invested time together, had kids, or built businesses together to find this out. Number 2, know that anything you want more than God will be taken from you, and that's anything and anyone. Number 3, trust that God will give you confirmation. There were specific things I prayed for in regards to a husband before I met him, and I watched God answer those things with my husband, and he still does so to this day. For an example, if I have an issue with my husband, if it's something kind of big, I take it to God first, and without saying anything to my husband, usually he will come to me in regard to the issue. So it's like God prepares his heart before I even say anything to him. Number 4, don't settle, but also don't be superficial. And what I mean by settling is like if you meet a guy that believes in God, but he smokes, drinks, and curses like a sailor, you know that is not what you're looking for. So don't go ahead and move forward into anything with him until you start to see a difference in him. And what I mean by don't be superficial, things like he must make 7 figures, or, he must work here or do this or do that. Your main concern should be, does he make a good living? And can you see you guys coming together to accomplish and maybe one day making 6 figures if that's something you desire and dream of? And number 5, develop a consistent prayer life and always pray for wisdom and discernment. Your flesh, which is your body, your mind, and your heart, are not dependable, and they will tell you to do and say things that may feel good in the moment, but could cause severe and traumatic consequences later on in your life. And if you need help with decision making, you can watch this video where I share some life-changing decisions I made that changed my life for the better. I hope this video was helpful to you while you're in your season of waiting or dating, and this by no means that these are the only things that you need to do or to know if someone is the one for you. So if you have questions, please leave me a comment, and don't forget to subscribe because I can and will elaborate more on this topic in future videos to answer your questions. So thanks for watching and have a great day.